Human survivor. Crashes on mythic world. Banished towering alien princess proposes. Alliance for escape. Sparks danced across the shattered console as Aiden Reese struggled to stay conscious, the acrid stench of burning circuitry searing his nostrils. The cockpit around him was alive with chaos, warning lights blazing crimson, alarms shrieking in desperate protest, and the tortured metal of the battered survey shuttle groaning as it plunged through Nixara's dense, roiling atmosphere. With every shuddering impact, his teeth rattled in his skull. He pressed trembling hands to the emergency controls, fighting to override the failing systems. Somewhere beneath him, the hull temperature soared, heat tracing lines of pain along his arms. Through the fractured viewport, the planet reared up in impossible detail. An endless tangle of forest glowing with a spectral luminescence, broken only by razor-edged obsidian peaks. "Hold together, just a little longer." Aiden ground out through gritted teeth, forcing the thruster array to respond. He could feel the craft structure giving way, could hear it. Rivets popping, metal buckling. A flash of warning. Too late. The port thruster detonated in a gout of white-blue fire. The shuttle spun, nose pitching downward. G-forces slammed him back, vision tunneling to a point of burning light. He braced for the crash. Metal shrieked, glass shattered, and then darkness, absolute and obliterating. When he returned to consciousness, pain was his first companion. It pulsed dully at his side, warm and wet at his brow. The cockpit had become a tomb. Glass shards sparkled like ice in the gloom, smoke coiling through the air. The only sound was the faint pop of cooling wires. "Assess, don't panic," Aiden rasped, rolling his aching body toward the warped hatch. His limbs shook as he forced it open, a groan escaping his lips. The outside air hit him, thick, tinged with ozone and something sweetly alien. He hauled himself out, boots dragging through warped metal, and stumbled into a world that seemed spun from dreams. The clearing had been carved by the crash, a ring of scorched earth encircled by forest. Trees, tall and elegant, shimmered with glassy bark that caught the weak daylight in prismatic shards. Flowers bloomed in impossible colors, petals glowing faintly as if lit from within. Aiden's breath caught in his throat, part wonder, part fear. He reached for his survival kit, fingers fumbling over the familiar weight of a compact arc blaster. The scanner beeped, its display awash with data. The air was breathable, but the composition strange, an undercurrent of something unidentifiable. He didn't hesitate. With practiced efficiency, he injected himself with a broad-spectrum antitoxin, the sting in his arm grounding him in the moment. The scanner's map was barren except for a single anomaly 4 kilometers northwest, a spike of energy, vast and steady. He set off at a careful jog, moving through the alien jungle, hyper-aware of every movement and sound. The air pulsed with the clicking calls of unseen creatures, and radiant insects darted in spiraling patterns above his head. Sweat pooled under his torn flight suit, mixing with blood that trickled in slow, sticky lines from his brow. Twice he had to step around roots that seemed to shift beneath his gaze, and once a cluster of flowers shivered as he passed, releasing a burst of violet motes. After what felt like hours, the jungle receded before something that did not belong. Rising from the forest, an immense structure dominated the clearing, built from matte black stone that drank in all light, swallowing it whole. The walls were smooth, impossibly precise, marked with spiraling etchings that twisted in and out of perception. At its center, a doorway yawned wide, shadows pooling in its depths. The air here felt charged, thrumming faintly beneath Aiden's skin. He advanced, blaster raised, every muscle taut. With a deep breath, he crossed the threshold. His footsteps echoed soft but sure, across flagstones worn smooth by centuries. Columns soared overhead, holding up a fractured dome through which thin shafts of light pierced the gloom. At the far end, on a raised platform, sat a throne, regal, foreboding, carved from the same devouring stone. He took one cautious step further. Then a clear, commanding voice rang out, echoing in the vastness. "I'd advise you not to come any closer." Aiden's heart jolted. He swung his blaster toward the voice, eyes scanning the shadows. "Show yourself," he demanded, keeping his tone steady despite the tremor in his chest. From behind the throne, a figure materialized, her presence both arresting and otherworldly. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, her athletic form clad in a suit that blended armor and supple fabric in seamless design. Her skin was a deep twilight blue, the color of distant nebulae, and her long pink hair cascaded past delicately pointed ears. Her eyes glowed, bright with intelligence and an inscrutable power. She descended the steps, each movement graceful and assured, gaze locked on Aiden with a predator's poise. "A human," she mused, her voice a rich, melodic resonance that filled the chamber. How unexpected. Aiden kept the blaster trained on her, but his stance shifted, a mixture of awe and wariness. "Who are you? What is this place?" She circled him, studying him with a slow, deliberate interest. "I am Lyrael, once heir to the Nixaran Dominion, now marooned here as you are." Her eyes lingered on his uniform, the battered insignia, the weapon in his hand. "This planet's energy fields are unlike any in the galaxy. No transmissions escape, nor do any arrive. In effect, you and I are both stranded, cut off from our worlds." Aiden's shoulders sagged slightly, the weight of her words sinking in. He scanned her face for deception, but found only steely resolve. "So we're trapped?" "Unless," Lyrael said, her lips curving in a hint of a smile, "we cooperate." Aiden hesitated, then finally lowered his weapon. "We'll find a way off this rock," he said, conviction ringing in his voice. Lyrael regarded him, something softening in her expression. "Perhaps. Your ship's technology is primitive, but I possess knowledge that could help us both. Together, escape is possible, but it requires more than a mere alliance." She stepped closer, closing the distance with an easy, predatory grace. "I require a pact, a union, formal, binding. Such a bond would give me standing to reclaim my birthright, and in return, your people would gain access to Nixaran science centuries ahead of your own." Aiden blinked, startled. "You're serious?" "Entirely." Lyrael extended a hand, long, graceful fingers outstretched between them. "Do we have an accord?" Every instinct screamed caution, but curiosity, and something deeper, drew him forward. He met her eyes, saw the promise and the peril there, and reached out. Their hands met, her skin cool and electric against his. "Deal, Lyrael." In that moment, the air between them seemed to shift, charged with possibility, peril, and the first spark of something entirely new. Dawn filtered through the fractured dome, painting pale ribbons of light across the debris as Aiden sifted through the wreckage of his ruined shuttle. Cold, damp air clung to him as he crouched beside the mangled fuselage, fingers numb from prying charred panels apart. Circuits hung in limp, blackened tangles. Every tool he touched told the same story. The crash had left the ship beyond repair. Without parts, he had no hope of fabricating here. The hope he'd clung to the night before felt thin as the morning mist. Footsteps, soft and measured, crunched over the broken gravel behind him. He looked up to see Lyrael, blue skin aglow with the faint blush of morning, moving with effortless poise through the chaos. Her long pink hair caught the sunrise, shimmering like a comet's tail. She paused, studying the crippled shuttle with an engineer's eye. "There's a derelict lab," she said, voice low but certain. 4 kilometers south. If the jungle hasn't claimed it, we may find what you need. She turned to meet his gaze, her eyes reflecting the fractured light. We should go soon. The wilds here are unpredictable after sunrise. Aiden hesitated, brushing sweat from his brow. How do you know it's there? Lirael's mouth twitched into a wry smile. This was my home once. I mapped every secret passage, every hidden ruin. Trust me, human. If there's a place to salvage, I know it. He nodded, slinging his pack over one shoulder. Together, they left the crash site behind, moving through the thickening forest. The silence stretched between them, awkward but not hostile, punctuated only by the distant calls of unseen creatures and the crunch of boots and bare feet over ancient roots. The air grew heavier as they pressed deeper, alive with the buzz of luminous insects and the hush of wind through glassy leaves. For a while they worked in quiet harmony. Lirael's skill quickly became apparent. She crouched beside a half-buried console, her slender hands moving with practiced precision as she detached a bank of crystalline memory cores. These might adapt to your ship's computer, she noted, passing them to Aiden with a brisk nod. Your technology is crude, but modular. Aiden shot her a sidelong glance, suppressing a smile. I'll take that as a compliment. She quirked an eyebrow. You should. The Nixaran Dominion was founded on adaptation. He watched her, curiosity prickling beneath his caution. You really were royalty? Her movements faltered for the briefest moment. She pressed a component into his hand, her expression shadowed. How does a princess end up stranded out here? Lirael's eyes lost their glimmer, replaced by something hard and distant. I opposed endless war. My brother and the council hungered for domination, expansion at any cost. When I spoke against them, I was branded a traitor. My own blood ordered my exile. She snapped a circuit free with a little more force than necessary, then looked away, jaw clenched. Aiden let the silence settle, the words echoing in the filtered light. He knelt beside her, feeling the urge to share his own story, something he rarely voiced. I get it. I wasn't always out here, alone. I commanded a fleet. They told me to fire on a civilian outpost. I refused. He shook his head, the memories sharp as broken glass. I couldn't do it, so they stripped my rank, sent me to survey dead worlds. Lirael studied him anew, her gaze less guarded. Disgrace for compassion. Your people punish mercy then? Aiden managed a bitter smile. Not all of them. But the ones in charge do. Their eyes met, and for a moment, a kind of understanding passed between them. A recognition of shared loss, of principles that had cost them everything. The jungle thickened as they continued, vines twisting in impossible patterns, flowers pulsing with internal light. Aiden's breath grew shallow, both from the exertion and the strange beauty all around. He glanced at Lirael, who moved with predatory grace, her senses alert to every shift in the shadows. Suddenly, the undergrowth exploded in a shower of leaves and splinters. An armored, multi-legged beast burst forth, serpentine and monstrous, its head plated in glossy black chitin, eyes like molten silver. It moved with terrifying speed, smashing through a fallen log as if it were tinder. Lirael reacted first. Her blade flashed, slicing deep into the creature's side. Black, viscous blood spattered the ground, sizzling where it touched the roots. Aiden's instincts kicked in. He dodged left, rolling to avoid the beast's snapping jaws. His arc blaster hummed to life, the blue charge crackling as he leveled it at the monster's exposed flank. He squeezed the trigger, sending a bolt of energy searing into the creature's carapace. It howled, body convulsing, and reared back in pain. Lirael darted forward, her movements a blur as she struck again. This time slicing a joint, forcing the creature to collapse with a guttural metallic shriek. "Go!" Lyrael shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Aiden scrambled to his feet, grabbing her hand as they sprinted away. The creature thrashed behind them, too stunned to pursue. They plunged through tangled brush, branches whipping past, lungs burning with effort. Only when the sounds faded did they dare to slow, collapsing side by side in a patch of luminous ferns. Aiden laughed, breathless. That was close. Lyrael wiped dark blood from her blade, a glint of admiration in her eyes. Impressive improvisation. Most humans would have frozen. He grinned, trying to catch his breath. I'm not most humans, and you're not exactly a typical princess. She regarded him with newfound respect, her lips curving into a genuine smile. No, I am not. They resumed their trek in companionable silence, the near miss having burned away the last of their mutual suspicion. Aiden noticed the subtle ways Lyrael guided their path, avoiding certain clearings, marking the calls of hidden predators. He found himself relying on her instincts, even as he kept his blaster close. By nightfall, exhaustion pressed down like a physical weight. Lyrael led them to a stone overhang, a relic of some ancient, shattered monument where they could make camp away from prowling beasts. Aiden gathered wood while Lyrael assembled a fire, coaxing blue-tinged flames from alien tinder. The glow cast strange shadows across the stone, bathing them in flickering light. They ate in silence, the warmth of the fire a fragile comfort in the night's chill. Gradually, conversation returned, hesitant at first, then more fluid, as if the day's danger had forged a bond neither could deny. Lyrael watched the fire, eyes distant. "We'll reach the lab by midday," she said, voice soft as the embers. "If the structure holds, there should be enough power cells, even after all these years." Aiden shifted, wincing at the ache in his bruised ribs. "Maybe then we can negotiate the details of this alliance." His words hung between them, heavy with implication. Lyrael's smile glimmered in the shadows. "If we survive?" There was a teasing note in her voice, but also a promise. Of danger, of possibility, of something neither could yet name. Aiden lay back, folding his arms behind his head, watching the unfamiliar constellations drift through the canopy. He listened to Lyrael's steady breathing, the quiet hum of the alien night, the distant howl of jungle predators. Above him, stars he could not name burned cold and bright. He was aware, with every heartbeat, that their arrangement was already more than he'd bargained for. An alliance forged in fire and blood, and something else that shimmered just out of reach, waiting to be discovered. The lab was a ruin, choked with curling vines and thick mats of glowing moss that painted the shattered walls in eerie emerald and violet. Shards of glass crunched beneath Aiden's boots as he ducked through the half-collapsed entrance, Lyrael a silent shadow at his back. Shafts of sickly sunlight slanted through broken panels overhead, illuminating drifts of dust and drifting pollen. The air tasted of mold and ozone, sharp enough to sting. Inside, the devastation of centuries was everywhere, consoles gutted by roots, display screens cracked and blank, once gleaming metal now pitted and tarnished. Yet beneath the decay, something of the lab's old purpose lingered. Tables still bore fragments of crystal circuitry, and the faint scent of old coolant hung in the air. Aiden's eyes roved hungrily over the debris, searching for anything that might breathe life back into his shuttle. He stepped around a toppled pillar, prying at a tangle of cables until his hand closed around a squat, heavy cylinder, etched with spiraling glyphs, its surface remarkably unmarred. "Data core," he said, holding it up so the faint light could catch its markings. "If it still works, we might have a shot." Lyrael was already at a battered terminal, her fingers ghosting over the control surface with expert care. "Let me," she murmured. She pressed the data core into a slot, and after a tense pause, a flicker of blue light raced across the panel. Holographic projections snapped into being above the console, ghostly, half-formed images that flickered and wavered as the ancient tech groaned to life. Aiden leaned in, brow furrowing as the scenes resolved. Human engineers in faded uniforms working side by side with Nixaran scientists, their tall, blue-skinned forms unmistakable. Laughter, gestures of camaraderie, glimpses of shared invention and discovery. The images rippled and jumped, but the message was clear. A partnership that time and fear had tried to bury. Lyrael's voice was almost reverent. "Our worlds once allied," she said, her eyes fixed on the flickering figures. "We shaped wonders together. Art, science, even peace. It was erased by those who feared change." Aiden watched as the hollows shifted to scenes of conflict, councils in shadow, arguments in languages he couldn't follow, images of doors closing and records burning. "Why erase it?" he asked softly. "Because unity threatened those who clung to power," Lyrael replied. "History is always written by the victors and rewritten by the frightened." The terminal sputtered and died, plunging them back into the moss-lit gloom. Silence lingered, heavy with ghosts. They made camp amid the relics, a pile of salvaged parts stacked between them. Lyrael assembled a makeshift lamp from a scavenged power cell, its light gentle and blue. The shadows that fell between them felt less like barriers now, more like the space between breaths. Aiden sat on a collapsed support beam, tools spread out before him, hands busy but mind drifting. Lyrael moved quietly at his side, her movements unhurried. After a while she spoke, voice soft as falling dust. "Among my people, a vow is binding, not just a promise, but a thread that ties lives together, across distance, even across time." He looked up, surprised by the vulnerability in her eyes. She settled beside him, her presence no longer intimidating but grounding, almost comforting. "When I asked for your accord, it was not out of desperation. It was hope." She hesitated, searching his face. "Perhaps we're not as different as we believed." Aiden felt the words settle in his chest, warm and unexpected. "Maybe not," he said, the tension in his shoulders easing. Her hand brushed his, a casual touch, yet it sent a jolt up his arm, sharp and electric. He looked at her, uncertain, but found nothing mocking in her expression, only curiosity and a hint of something softer. The moment hovered, fragile as spun glass. A sudden mechanical whir shattered the quiet. Both of them tensed, the spell broken. Through a gap in the wall, a small hovering probe drifted, its cyclopean lens blinking as it scanned the ruins. Lyrael's eyes narrowed. "Imperial tracker!" she hissed. "My brother knows we're alive." Aiden was already moving, snatching up his pack and blaster. "How fast can you move?" "Fast enough. Come, now!" Lyrael was a blur of motion, snuffing the lamp, her hand tightening around the hilt of her blade. They gathered what they could, adrenaline burning away hesitation. Outside, the sky darkened as a dropship descended through the canopy, its thrusters sending leaves and spores swirling in turbulent spirals. Klaxons wailed in the distance, too close. "There's an emergency beacon 15 kilometers east," Lyrael called as they dashed through the brush, her voice hard-edged but clear. "If we reach it, we might signal for help. But they'll hunt us every step." Aiden's lungs burned as they plunged deeper into the jungle. The world seemed to close in. The trees pressed closer, vines snagged at his feet, and clouds of iridescent spores drifted on the air, thickening with every breath. His vision blurred at the edges. Each step became a struggle, the ground pitching beneath him as if the world itself had turned hostile. "Keep moving," Lyriel urged, glancing back, worry etched in her features. He tried, but the spores thickened, a perfumed haze that clung to his skin and filled his mouth with a sweet, cloying taste. His head spun, sweat poured down his back, his feet tangled, and suddenly he was falling, arms flailing, knees buckling. The world tilted, went sideways, then dark. Lyriel caught him before he hit the ground. She gripped his shoulders, her strength steadying. Nyxaran spores. They're toxic to off-worlders. We must find shelter until you recover. He tried to answer, but the words tangled on his tongue. He felt himself lifted. Lyriel's arm braced around his waist as she half-carried, half-dragged him through a maze of roots and rocks. His vision narrowed to flashes, her hair glinting, her jaw set in determination, the press of her hand against his chest as she forced him onward. A cave mouth yawned ahead, hidden by a curtain of moss. Lyriel ducked inside, lowering Aiden to a bed of soft, dry leaves. She moved with purposeful haste, stripping off his jacket, examining his flushed face and glazed eyes. "Stay with me," she said, voice low and commanding. She rummaged through her satchel, producing a bundle of pungent herbs and a vial of oily liquid. She crushed the herbs, mixing them with water, then dabbed the mixture onto his skin. The salve burned, sharp and alien, but her touch was gentle. Fingers cool and careful as she smeared the paste along his throat and wrists. Aiden's breath rattled, each inhale a struggle. "You could leave me," he managed, the words barely audible. "You'd move faster alone." Lyriel's lips quirked in a faint, sad smile. "Perhaps I've grown fond of your stubbornness." She pressed her hand to his fevered brow, her presence anchoring him as the world slipped further away. Besides, a vow is a vow. He tried to hold her gaze, but darkness gathered at the edges of his vision. "Don't." The word caught in his throat. "Rest," she whispered, her voice soothing as she held his hand, steady as the stars beyond the stone. "I will not leave you." As delirium claimed him, Aiden clung to the sound of her voice, the cool weight of her hand, and the strange comfort of knowing he was not alone, whatever waited outside in the Nyxaran night. Aiden woke to the sound of water trickling over stone, the air around him cool and faintly sweet. He blinked, vision sharpening to the pale glow of bioluminescent lichen along the cave's vaulted ceiling. Lyriel stood at the entrance, her silhouette rigid, arc blade drawn. When she noticed he was awake, the severity in her posture eased. Her lips parted in relief, eyes bright with something softer. "You're recovering," she said, voice barely more than a whisper but resonant in the hush of the cave. Aiden propped himself up on one elbow, the ache in his limbs fading, replaced by the gentle throb of life returning. "How long was I out?" "Long enough to worry me," Lyriel replied, sheathing her blade. She crossed to him, kneeling at his side. "But your fever broke. The toxins have passed." Her hand brushed his brow, lingering for a moment as if anchoring herself to the certainty of his warmth. He managed a lopsided smile. "Guess your Nyxaran medicine works wonders." She returned the smile, brief but genuine. "I learned from the best. This cave is rich in old remedies." Her gaze drifted to the shadowy depths beyond. "Come. There is something you should see." Still unsteady but trusting her, Aiden followed Lyriel deeper into the cavern. The tunnel sloped downward, opening into a broad chamber where crystalline roots gleamed in the walls and veins of silver traced ancient murals. She led him toward the center, where the sound of water grew stronger. "This place." Lyriel's voice was reverent, almost mournful. "It was sacred to the planet's first people, long before the Dominion. They believed the springs here connected all life, binding Nyxara's soul to the stars." She traced a glyph on the wall, fingers tender. "My ancestors destroyed much of it when they claimed this world. They saw only resources, never the meaning. Aiden knelt beside her, the gravity of history pressing on his chest. "That's why you fought for change," he murmured. She nodded, her profile limned in the glow of the mineral-lit pool. "I was raised on stories of conquest, told to believe expansion was our destiny. But I saw what it cost, what we lost. This is why I was cast out." She knelt beside the spring, her reflection wavering beside his in the mirror-bright water. They lingered there, silent stretching as their eyes met in the shifting light. Aiden felt the question rising, too urgent to hold back. "When you suggested this alliance," he asked quietly, "was it just strategy? Or was there something else?" Lyrael didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. Her skin was warm and impossibly soft. "At first," she admitted, searching his face for something. "It was necessity. I needed leverage, an ally, a way out." She squeezed his hand, thumb brushing his knuckles. "But now, I'm not so sure." "You are not what I expected, Aiden Reese." The tension between them, coiled for so long, finally broke. Aiden leaned in, hesitation falling away. Their lips met. Tentative at first, a question and an answer all at once. The kiss deepened, urgent and hungry, all the fear and longing of the past days spilling between them. Lyrael's hands explored his body, mapping the unfamiliar terrain with curiosity and care. Aiden's fingers slid into her hair, marveling at its silken weight. Her body pressed against his, solid and real, a promise made flesh. They moved together on the smooth stone, the cave echoing with their breaths and quiet laughter. Their union was not just a negotiation, it was a leap of faith, a surrender to hope where none should have survived. Afterward, Lyrael rested her head on Aiden's bare chest, her breath slow and even. The ancient murals watched over them, silent witnesses to something new in the long history of the cavern. "They called me tainted for seeking peace," Lyrael whispered, voice raw. "My brother, the council, they said I endangered our future." Aiden stroked her pink hair, twining it around his fingers. "I was told I was weak for refusing orders, for choosing not to kill. Maybe that's why this feels right, like a rebellion and a homecoming at the same time." She lifted her head, more vulnerable than he had ever seen her, eyes luminous in the dimness. "If we escape, maybe this can be more than politics, more than a pact made in desperation." Aiden smiled, tracing her cheek. "I think it already is." They lay there for a long while, the old world cradling them as if it, too, hoped for redemption. When dawn crept through the cracks in the cave's mouth, they dressed and packed their gear. Stepping into the morning, they found the world changed. Surveillance drones orbited in slow, searching circles overhead, their lights cold and watchful. Far to the east, the jagged outline of the communications array rose above the trees. Lyrael's expression hardened as she took in the scene. "They're expecting us," she murmured, eyeing the armored sentries patrolling the clearing around the facility. Their weapons gleamed, every movement precise, no margin for error. Aiden assessed the situation, mind racing. "We'll never reach the array head-on, but maybe we don't have to." He rummaged through their salvaged tech, assembling a handful of devices, scrap amplifiers, a damaged speaker coil, an energy cell cracked but functional. "What are you doing?" Lyrael asked, crouching beside him. He grinned, fingers working quickly. "I heard enough of the jungle's predators last night. If I can mimic their calls, maybe we can create a little chaos, give the sentries something bigger to worry about than us." She watched, admiration mingling with amusement. "Risky. I like it." Aiden finished the improvised device, wires sparking as he set the frequency. He handed Lyrael a second unit. Plant this on the far side, near that nest of twisted roots. I'll take the other west. She nodded and slipped away, a blue phantom among the ferns. Aiden skirted the clearing, every sense stretched to the breaking point. When both units were in place, he signaled Lyriel with a flash of his blaster's light. He triggered the call, a guttural, thunderous bellow that rolled through the jungle, followed by the shriek of something vast and unseen. The response was immediate. The sentries snapped to attention, weapons raised, scanning the tree line. A second later, real predators crashed through the underbrush, sleek, six-limbed beasts drawn by the challenge. Sentries shouted, lines broke, chaos erupted as fur and armor collided. Now! Aiden shouted, sprinting toward the facility. Lyriel was beside him in an instant, her blade flashing as she dropped a startled guard with a single fluid motion. They darted through the fray, the cacophony of battle masking their escape. Inside, Aiden dove for the comms panel, jamming the salvaged power cell into place. The beacon flickered, then glowed bright, its signal screaming into the sky. Lyriel stood at the door, covering him as another pair of guards barreled in. She dispatched them with ruthless grace, her movements a dance of deadly precision. A moment later, the beacon pulsed, and a ship responded from orbit, its shadow falling over the facility. A warning shot lanced down, detonating in the clearing with a blast that sent sentries and beasts alike scattering. Aiden looked up, grinning, arc blaster humming in his grip. Our ride's here. Lyriel flashed a fierce smile, tension and triumph mingling in her eyes. Let's not keep them waiting. Together, they raced for the landing pad, side by side, ready for whatever the future dared to bring. Aboard the Starward, the recycled air was tinged with ozone and engine oil, punctuated by the steady thrum of the ship's core. Captain Mara Voss leaned back in her command chair, one eyebrow arched as she regarded Aiden with a look that balanced exasperation and affection. Stranded on a forbidden planet with an alien princess. Classic Reese. Her voice echoed faintly over the bridge's comms. Aiden only grinned, rubbing the back of his neck. You know me, Mara. I never do anything by halves. At the starboard viewport, Lyriel stood tall, her regal bearing undiminished even in borrowed fatigue several sizes too large. The uniform's drabness did nothing to diminish the glimmer of authority in her eyes as she coordinated with both Mara and Aiden over the navigational controls. She spoke with calm certainty, her words measured and precise. We must proceed directly to a human diplomatic station. No detours, no delays. Her tone brooked no argument, and Mara, after a brief pause, nodded her assent. I'll need clearance from the United Systems, Mara said, glancing at Aiden. That's your department, Captain. Aiden wasted no time patching into the secure comms channel. He called in every favor he'd banked over a lifetime of impossible missions and scarred alliances. Faces from his past flickered across the screen, some smiling, some scowling, but all listening as he made his case. Word came back with the faintest note of warning. Relations between Nixarans and humans were unraveling fast. The Nixaran Dominion's new rhetoric painted humanity as untrustworthy. Whispers said Lyriel's brother, Kairos, was consolidating his power, using the recent crisis to blame outsiders. As Starward sliced through the ether toward safe harbor, Aiden found Lyriel in the navigation alcove, her gaze distant. The station's expecting us, he told her, but it's tense. Your brothers stirred up a hornet's nest. Lyriel's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Then we must give them reason to hope for more than old grievances. Ambassador Hollis met them at the docking port, a short, silver-haired woman with a diplomat's careful smile and a soldier's no-nonsense stride. You two have made quite the impression, she said, shaking Aiden's hand and bowing respectfully to Lyriel. The council's waiting for answers. She motioned them into a private suite where light refracted off crystal panels, painting shifting patterns on the walls. Inside, Hollis arranged a discreet meeting with the United Systems Council. In the hush that followed, Aiden squeezed Lyriel's hand, voice low and earnest. Some bonds run deeper than politics. Lyriel turned to him, her eyes searching his. Let us hope the Council understands that, she murmured. Later, as the station's night cycle deepened, Aiden sat alone in the crew quarters, turning his battered pilot's badge over in his hand. The metal was scratched and dulled, the emblem faded but still legible, a relic of a life before exile and alliances forged in desperation. The door slid open with a gentle hiss. Lyriel stepped in, pausing in the doorway, her presence filling the room with quiet gravity. She watched him a moment, then crossed to his side. Nixerans preserve memories through shared mind links, less poetic than humans, perhaps. She regarded the badge, her head tilting in curiosity. But I'm beginning to appreciate your sentimentality. Aiden smiled softly. Sometimes memories are all you have to hold on to. Lyriel moved closer, her voice almost teasing. You humans are always clinging to tokens and stories. She slid into his arms, her body pressing against his, and for a moment, the burdens of duty and politics fell away. Their pact, once a calculated gamble, felt more real, more vital than ever. The next morning, they boarded a diplomatic shuttle bound for the Nixeran capital. The shuttle's windows framed the world below. Silver seas, jagged obsidian ranges, and cities that gleamed like jewels at night. Lyriel stood at the viewport, hands clasped tight, her eyes bright with a tumult of longing and regret. Exile changes everything, she said quietly, the words raw as an old wound. Aiden rested his hand on hers. We faced them together. At the Planetary Council complex, they presented the data core and hollows, ancient records of cooperation between their peoples, secured under the watchful eye of Ambassador Hollis. The Council granted them provisional protection, a tenuous shield as they prepared to confront the High Council. The corridors buzzed with tension, armored guards posted at every junction. The day of reckoning had come. Inside the vast council chamber, light filtered through stained glass, painting the floor in shifting constellations. Lyriel and Aiden stood before the assembly, a semicircle of elders in dark robes, and at their center, her brother, High Lord Kairos. He was taller than Lyriel, his presence cold and unyielding, flanked by guards in obsidian armor. As they stepped forward, the guards leveled accusations, their voices ringing with rehearsed outrage. Lyriel is a traitor. Her very presence is an act of war. Hollis raised her hand, invoking interstellar diplomatic law with practiced authority. By right of treaty, my clients are entitled to address this assembly. The words forced the council to pause, if only for formality's sake. Aiden squeezed Lyriel's hand one last time before releasing her. She stepped forward, her voice steady, the years of exile and loss braided into every word. My exile was unjust. I sought only to prevent needless war. I bring proof, evidence of an alliance erased from memory by those who feared change. Kairos scoffed, a gesture both regal and dismissive. Fables for children. Lyriel met his gaze, defiant. Then let the records speak. She activated the data core. Holographic images filled the chamber. Nixerans and humans side by side, building, dreaming, and thriving together. Arguments gave way to gasps as the elders watched their history unfold, evidence undeniable. One of the oldest counselors leaned forward, her voice quavering. Is this true, Kairos? Did you know of this? Kairos's expression tightened, but the elders murmured, their unity cracking. With no path to immediate condemnation, the council decreed, Lyriel and Aiden will remain under council protection until a verdict is reached. No harm shall come to them. That night, in the diplomatic compound's private quarters, Hollis entered with a grim look. There are whispers, an assassination plot. Not all are willing to let the law decide. We must be ready. Lyriel stood, her eyes flashing with resolve. I have allies here, loyalists who remember what the Dominion was before my brother's reign. I will summon them. She slipped out, a blue shadow in the corridors, rallying those who still believed in her cause. Aiden paced the room, scanning every access point, rigging makeshift alarms from comms gear and scavenged tech. He checked his arc blaster, tested the locks, and positioned defensive barriers near the windows. When Lyriel returned, flanked by 3 Nixarin loyalists, she nodded approval at his preparations. The attack came just before dawn, a muffled explosion at the courtyard gate, shouts in Nixaran echoing down the stone halls. Lyriel drew her blade, her stance poised and royal, every movement a blend of ceremonial training and battlefield instinct. Aiden fired short, controlled bursts, his years of combat sharpening his reflexes. Together, they fought back to back. Aiden covering Lyriel as she disarmed a masked assassin, Lyriel parrying a blade meant for Aiden's throat. Loyalists rallied to their side, turning the tide with disciplined force. In the aftermath, bodies lay sprawled across the polished floor, the stink of ozone and scorched silk heavy in the air. Lyriel knelt beside a wounded ally, her hands steady, her words gentle. Aiden stood over her, watchful but unbowed. The council's guards arrived too late, but the proof of betrayal and the pair's survival only strengthened their case. They glanced at one another. No words needed. Their union, forged in desperation and fire, now blazed at the heart of a movement for peace and change. Tension crackled in the council hall like a static storm, every breath weighted with anticipation. The elders sat in judgment, their faces illuminated by shafts of pale Nixaran sunlight filtering through crystalline windows. Kairos, imperious and unyielding, stood at the center of the chamber, voice ringing with accusation. They have incited violence and sowed chaos, he declared, sweeping his arm toward Lyriel and Aiden. You saw the attack last night. This is what comes from consorting with outworlders and traitors. A hush fell, eyes flicking from Lyriel to the bruises on Aiden's jaw, to the lingering smoke stains on the council floor. Lyriel met her brother's glare without flinching. You accuse us of chaos, she replied, her voice cool and clear. But it is your desperation that brought blades into these halls. You would rather see Nixara torn apart than face your own failures. Kairos's fists clenched, knuckles pale. You would threaten our sovereignty for your own ambitions. I would save our people from a future built on lies and fear. Lyriel shot back. She turned to the council, her tone softer, entreating. You have seen the records. You know now that our history was stolen. I ask only for the chance to restore what was lost. The elders exchanged hushed words, ancient faces shadowed with doubt and dawning realization. After long minutes, the eldest among them stood, voice trembling with the gravity of history. We have reviewed the evidence and weighed your words, Lyriel of the Blood. Your exile was unjust. We propose your reinstatement as co-ruler, so the mistakes of the past are not repeated. Shock rippled through the chamber, the verdict falling like thunder. Kairos's lips curled in fury. Never, he spat. If you wish to claim Nixara, then face me in the old way. His hand swept to the ceremonial blade at his hip. I invoke the ancient right of challenge, a duel at sunrise. Lyriel's eyes narrowed, accepting without hesitation. So be it. Dawn found the ceremonial arena alive with restless energy, the stands brimmed with citizens and counselors, the air thick with expectancy. In the center, Aiden watched from behind a shimmering force barrier, his heart pounding with helpless concern. Lyriel entered, clad in ceremonial armor, blue-black plates etched with the spiral motifs of her house, her long pink hair braided tight against her back. Across from her, Kairos waited, taller and broader, armored in gold, his eyes hard as obsidian. The signal sounded. Kairos lunged, his style a brutal display of strength and tradition, blade whistling through the air in sweeping arcs. Lyriel met his onslaught with fluid grace, parrying and circling, her footwork lighter than shadow on water. Aiden recognized some of her moves, adaptations from their training on Nyxara, and subtle flourishes borrowed from human tactics. A feint here, a low sweep there, unorthodox angles that forced Kairos to overextend. Steel clashed, sparks flaring in the pale morning light. Kairos pressed his advantage, his attacks relentless, but Lyriel bent without breaking, absorbing his fury and twisting it against him. She dodged a heavy overhead blow, pivoted, and caught his wrist with a deft hook. With a disarming flick, she sent his blade skittering across the arena floor. She leveled her own weapon at his throat, breathing hard but steady. "Yield," she commanded, her voice resonant over the silent crowd. Kairos glared up at her, sweat beading on his brow. For a heartbeat, defiance warred with defeat in his eyes. At last, he bowed his head, voice ragged. "I yield." The crowd erupted, cheers and gasps echoing through the arena. Counselors rose, hands pressed over their hearts. Lyriel's name rolled across the stands, a chorus of hope and relief. The following weeks blurred into a whirlwind of diplomacy and transformation. Lyriel, now co-ruler by decree, opened negotiations with the United Systems. Her message was one of healing, of partnership restored. She stood before crowds and cameras, her voice measured and passionate, promising a new age. In private, she worked long hours with Aiden and Ambassador Hollis, hammering out the framework for peace, trade routes, educational exchanges, shared technology. Aiden, officially pardoned for his insubordination, found himself named envoy to Nyxara. The very act that had ended his old career now became his greatest qualification. He navigated tense meetings, old grievances, and suspicious stares, his plain-spoken honesty winning over those slowest to trust. Where Lyriel's diplomacy won hearts, Aiden's stubborn sincerity broke down walls. Their union, once conceived in desperation, became a symbol for the galaxy. At the ceremony that sealed the new era, traditions from both worlds entwined. Lyriel was radiant in a flowing Nyxaran gown of midnight blue and silver, her hair crowned with living crystals that shimmered with every movement. Aiden stood awkwardly but resolute in a tailored suit, the same battered pilot's badge tucked discreetly inside his jacket. They stood beneath a canopy of swirling lights, holographic stars and real blossoms suspended in gravity fields. Elders from both cultures spoke blessings, their voices rising in harmonious counterpoint. When the time came, Lyriel and Aiden joined hands, palms pressed together, their bond sealed in front of two peoples united by hope and memory. Afterward, the festivities spilled onto the palace balconies. Music drifted through the warm night air. Laughter and song echoed from gardens below. But for Aiden and Lyriel, the world narrowed to the sanctuary of their private terrace, high above the city. The lights of Nyxara spread beneath them, rivers of silver and gold winding through the darkness. Lyriel leaned on the railing, her ceremonial garb trailing like starlight behind her. She looked out at the world she had fought to reclaim, her face serene, yet shadowed with the weight of all she had endured. "Do you regret this?" she asked quietly, searching Aiden's face for uncertainty. He reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "Not for a moment. Even when it was hopeless, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be." Her luminous eyes softened, the last remnants of doubt falling away. "No, Aiden Reese, no regrets." She pressed a kiss to his knuckles, then leaned against him, her warmth a promise that needed no words. Together, they gazed out at a future shaped by their alliance. The once forbidden world beneath them, now the birthplace of hope, neither had dared to dream. The night stretched on, alive with possibility. That's the end of the story. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and write in the comments what you liked most about this story. Our team will be very grateful to you. You can find even more fascinating stories on our channel. See you in the next video.